Now it's time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Hi, Lawrence.
Jen, I watched the whole thing. So that.
Oh boy!
I noticed.
Buckle up, everybody.
I noticed you didn't, by the way. I noticed exactly when you bailed out on it, which was even more than necessary to understand what it was about. And so now we know. Now we know. I'm looking at my notes here of what he had to say. It was really a 25-minute, basically begging to pass a bill that Republican senators have said they will not vote. Thom Tillis today, Republican Senator Thom Tillis today, explained once again why he absolutely will not vote for what Donald Trump calls the SAVE Act and what Donald Trump basically did this speech for. He ended it with the, pass this bill moment. That was it. That was the whole thing was about, all the nonsense that he was spewing, which is already being ripped apart online and everywhere about these so-called new documents that he has, intelligence documents about this. But it was really, if he had told the truth to the networks, I just want to come on and push one piece of legislation, which is what the whole thing was about. Of course, the networks are going to say, no, that's not what we do. You have to just do that, the old-fashioned way of trying to convince people on the Hill to vote for your bill. And that's what it was about. All this nonsense about, oh, we have secret information we're going to reveal. That was all just a lie, a typical Trump lie, to get to this point where he could do this thing. And so I'm just going to, when I get to it here, I'm just going to rattle through my notes and not torture the audience with too much of the video of this. I think you already showed enough.
We've already ripped apart most of that speech to shreds and debunked and fact-checked and then dug up conspiracy theories. So you just continue and you do what you do. We'll all be watching.
We're going to get to it. We have Jon Ossoff on the way to join us, and we have Jim Himes from the Intelligence Committee, Lissa Slotkin. And they're very eager to talk about this. He talked about Michigan, so the senator from Michigan is going to join us, and we're going to get to that right now.
Look forward to it.
Thanks, Jen. So he started off in a typically perverse Trumpian way with a typically deeply sick Trump statement. He actually said the words, and he was reading this from a teleprompter. We had transgender for everybody. So I guess that was what, Donald Trump's way of coming out as transgender, because everybody means the guy who's saying it. But that's the sentence that was put in the teleprompter for him by the deeply sick people who work in the White House who pumped that stuff into his teleprompter. He was talking about the state of the world as he found it when he became president. And he said, we had transgender for everybody. That was right at the beginning of his speech. This obsession that he has with transgender issues and transgender people. And suddenly, all 300 million people in America were suddenly in this demented man's hallucination, transgender. And then what? He got us all back to whatever gender he thinks we were before. He got to be, it is so deeply sick. Every single beat of this speech is deeply, deeply sick, a deeply sick delivery by a deeply sick person. He said this lie that everyone knows is a lie, written for him in the teleprompter. It wasn't an ad lib. He said, now we pay the lowest price for prescription drugs anywhere in the world. He put that lie, had that lie written into his teleprompter, and that's how he began his speech. And it began as what seemed like a State of the Union address. Halfway through the year, just a State of the Union address. These are all the wonderful things I've done with this presidency, including we won in Venezuela and we are winning big in Iran. That was there. That was right there in the beginning of his presentation tonight, which was really, as I told Jen, about simply getting to the point where he could make his pitch for this bill that is never going to pass the United States Senate. And Republican senators have said they will never pass the bill. And that's what he was out there doing tonight, talking repeatedly about what he called cheating and interference in our elections. And there is no American who has tried to cheat and interfere in our election in a bigger way than Donald Trump himself, who was indicted for it. He was indicted for his cheating and interference in Georgia. He was indicted for his cheating and interference in a federal indictment. That's who's up there giving this speech tonight about cheating and interference in our elections and talking about how foreign countries possess voter information, which by now everyone has already talked about, and as Jen covered in the last hour, is publicly available information. You don't have to hack anything to get that information. And it just goes on, talking about these documents, talking about a voter registration investigation in Michigan. We'll get Senator Slotkin's reaction to that, what he had to say about that. And it all came down to this moment of just trying to get to pass this bill of his that he wants to pass. And that's really what it was all about. It was an utterly ridiculous thing from start to finish. The networks who refused to cover it did exactly the right thing. And of course, they got their license, their broadcast licenses threatened tonight by Donald Trump for doing exactly the right thing in refusing to air his stream of madness. And so here we are. After Mitch McConnell issued a proof of life photograph earlier this week, Donald Trump delivered a proof of dementia video tonight, 25 minutes of it. Election dementia, anyway, at minimum election dementia. Because Donald Trump's pathological lying and screaming outright insanity on this subject year in and year out has become so easily predictable. Careful clinicians studying this patient, Trump, like Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff, were able to tell us 9 hours before the event what was going to happen tonight.
Here's what's going to happen tonight. The world's most famous sore loser will deliver a primetime presidential sour grapes address to pursue his 6-year-old grievances about the 2020 election, while his war in the Middle East spirals out of control and the cost of living continues to rise for Americans across the country. I expect the president to reheat debunked conspiracy theories about the repeatedly litigated and audited and confirmed 2020 presidential election in Georgia, an election that Donald Trump lost. And let me be very clear about this. If the president declares Georgia's elections illegitimate, or if the president declares Georgia's sitting United States senators illegitimate, he is declaring Georgia voters illegitimate. It's Donald Trump who tried to defraud Georgia voters in that election. Donald Trump who tried to commit election fraud when he called Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, and it was caught on tape, and you should play the tape for your viewers today, and badgered and bullied Georgia's top election official to, quote, find him the votes that he needed to win in a state where he had lost.
All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
That is the sound of a crime in progress. Donald Trump was indicted for that phone call in the state of Georgia and in a federal indictment charging him with a conspiracy against the United States of America. Here's another part of that phone call.
You should want to have an accurate election. And you're a Republican.
We believe that we do have an accurate election.
Trump knew. Trump knew it was an accurate election. The Republican Secretary of State in Georgia told him it was an accurate election. The Republican governor of Georgia believed it was an accurate election and said so. Donald Trump's own campaign advisors told him it was an accurate election. And they testified to Jack Smith that they told him that it was an accurate election. They told, his own advisors told Donald Trump that he lost, and he knew it. But Donald Trump believes that his voters are the stupidest voters, not just in America, but in the world. And so Donald Trump has always believed that he can spend the rest of his life lying to his voters about anything His lies have not been working for him this year. His lies about his war in Iran have not been working. His lies about his tariffs have not been working. His lies about the cost of living and affordability have not been working, and how much he has made it much worse. Voters know that. That is what has sunk him to new lows in the polls. And tonight, Donald Trump tried to go back to his big lie, his favorite lie, to climb out of the dark hole that he is in the polls. And so he defiled the White House once again tonight with a 25-minute demented exhibition of political pornography just to say this.
Congress must pass the Save America Act.
Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut. He's the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman Himes, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I just want to let you go on your reaction to everything he said that is in your jurisdiction in the Intelligence Committee.
Yeah, so Lawrence, because this is so important and because I don't believe it's only about the SAVE Act, let me not put any fine point on this. The President of the United States lied to the American public today. It was a bald-faced, 180-degree, obviously provable lie. Why do I say that? I have reviewed all of the intelligence that the president supposedly declassified, and there is absolutely nothing in that intelligence which that substantiates what he was saying. That Venezuela was doing this, that Russia and China was doing this. The conclusion of the intelligence community under Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, his guy who's at CIA right now, was that there was no meddling. You can look at it. This is a public report. There was no meddling in the meddling meaning interference, no screwing around with vote totals, with voter lists, with machines, etc. Yes, Russia wanted to reelect Donald Trump. That is in there too. And yes, Iran didn't want Donald Trump to win. And so they put out propaganda. They put out misinformation. But there is nothing in the record to suggest that anything that the president said tonight was true. And the reason I'm animated about this, by the way, for anybody out there who thinks that this is an MS Now, Lawrence O'Donnell Democrat talking, I want you to go to whitehouse.gov and I want you to open up the section on China. I've reviewed every single one of those documents, but you can't do that. And the reason you can't do that, and do it right now, and you will see that every single one of those China documents is almost entirely redacted. It is black line after black line after you can't read anything. There's individual words. There's maybe 20 words in 30 documents. By the way, if those documents did anything to prove the president's case, do you think they'd be redacted? No. You would have more than 12 words. Look at the Venezuela report. Please go to whitehouse.gov right now and look at the Venezuela report. And what you will see is an old report that says, hey, Maduro and Chavez before him, they wanted to influence, here's the key word, Venezuela elections.
Right.
But the president of the United States says, look, Venezuela wanted to influence elections. And so what the president did tonight was lie. And the issue I'm going to take with you, Lawrence, is that yes, maybe it's partly about the SAVE Act, which is a ridiculous solution to a problem that does not exist. Foreigners do not vote in U.S. elections. That's the fact. But what worries me, and the reason you hear some emotion and some passion right now, is because here's the scenario. Election day is going poorly. Jon Ossoff has been clearly reelected. In Michigan, a Democratic senator so the House of Representatives is about to change hands to a Democratic majority and maybe even the Senate. And what do you think happens? I know what happens because I was stuck in the chamber on January 6, 2021, when a mob of thousands of people motivated by the president tried to stop the transfer of power. So when Donald Trump sees that those are the results, which are likely, he's going to say, remember in July when I told you that the Venezuelans and the Chinese, that's exactly what happened. So what we're talking about here is not about the SAVE Act, which is an abomination, but it is about setting the stage for Donald Trump to reject the results of the upcoming election. And every American citizen, and I know it's hard to reach some of the president's most closest acolytes, because I work with 220 of them in the United States House of Representatives. That's the Republican conference. But this is a moment for the American people to say, what is going on here? Look at whitehouse.gov, look at the China section, and look at document after document after document, which is nothing but black lines of redaction. That tells the story.
I believe you and the New York Times and other members of Congress are going to completely dismantle, as you're doing right now, and I want to encourage you to keep doing it, these documents that he's talking about. But take me to this other point. Take me to that election. Now we're after the election. in the scenario you just came up with, we're counting votes in Georgia, and you said Donald Trump will reject the election and do what?
Here's what happens. Senator Ossoff, who you just had on tape there, has clearly won.
Yeah.
We know how the president feels about Georgia. You ran the clip. When he lost Georgia, did he concede? No. He called up Brad Raffensperger, Republican Secretary of State, find me 11,000 votes. Clearly corrupt. No one can look at that and say that's anything other than criminal, but also corrupt.
Right.
So when John Ossoff wins, this is just one example. And remember, there's a Senate race in Michigan. There's a Senate race in North Carolina. Donald Trump looks at that and he says, my people in Venezuela, because remember, Donald Trump and Marco Rubio are running Venezuela, have found secret intelligence that shows that in Caracas, Maduro's cousin manipulated voting machines in Georgia. This is how this happens. This is how American democracy goes away. Now, a lot of people know me. I've been in this position for some period of time. I'm not an alarmist. In fact, I get a lot of guff for being a little overly optimistic and overly calm. But understand what happened tonight. The president was setting the context. He was setting the basis for him to turn around at midnight on Election Day and say, I warned you. I warned you back in July that the Chinese were doing XYZ and the Venezuelans were doing XYZ and all this terrible stuff. It happened tonight. I am deploying federal officers from the Department of Homeland Security to 7 states. They will be seizing ballot boxes in those states because we know that lots of undocumented aliens voted in those things. So we are seizing ballot boxes. Now, Lawrence O'Donnell, what happens when all of a sudden we've lost the chain of custody of 70 ballot boxes in critical? That is the moment in which American democracy dies. Make no mistake. What happened tonight?
What's the defense against that?
The defense against that is what I'm trying to do tonight, which is that the American people need to understand, as much as you may love Donald Trump, as much as you may hate the Democrats, there is something that we care about more than our party affiliation, and that is the preservation of our democracy. And part of the energy you're hearing from me tonight is the fact that I was one of the last people out of the chamber of the House of Representatives on January 6, 2021. I saw our democracy come this close to ending. And the energy you're hearing from me tonight is that I see the path. And this is the moment for every American to go to whitehouse.gov, as the president asked you to do, to look at the China section, to read the report. By the way, John Radcliffe, old friend of mine, runs the CIA right now, right? Old friend of mine, current friend of mine. Please read his statement. Read his statement on Twitter. It says, we provided documents. Every American should look at those documents. Nowhere in John Radcliffe, the president's guy running the CIA, in his statement does it say, and I agree with everything the president said tonight. You know why it doesn't say that? Because he doesn't.
Jim Himes, invaluable to have you here as our leadoff guest covering this tonight. And please come back. There's going to be more on this over the coming days and as we get to November, because your warning is the most important thing that can be said about what was going on tonight. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. When we come back, Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin will join us. In the speech that most of America wisely did not watch tonight and never will watch, Donald Trump said this.
We won in Venezuela. We are likewise winning big in Iran, and you will see the fruits of that labor very, very shortly.
Joining us now is Democratic Senator Elissa Slotkin of Michigan. She's a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. Senator, thank you very much for joining us tonight. There's a lot to talk about here, but I want to begin with that line that you just heard Donald Trump say, winning big in Iran.
Well, look, actually, while that speech was going on, we had one of the largest military operations going on in Iran right now. And he conveniently said very, very little about the war. I mean, I think, when he first announced he was giving this speech, I actually thought this was just a way to distract the American public from realizing the ceasefire is completely gone and we are now back in serious combat operations with really no clear end in sight. And I think what's interesting is that the president thinks he can tell the American people, we're winning, we're doing great, when they still know the price of gas. He went on and on about how the economy was the best it's ever been. People aren't stupid. And I think the president just believes he can wave his hand. And on the war in Iran, there's really only 3 things to do here, and none of them are great. One, we can continue what we're doing, kind of these nights of combat operations, and then they shoot back at the Gulf states and at our installations. Number two, we can escalate to de-escalate. We can do even more force. You know, the president hasn't ruled out sending in ground troops, doing more to try and get to some new place. Or we can cut an even worse deal where the Iranians maintain this sort of veto on who goes through the Straits of Hormuz. So none of those are great options. And I think the president's talk today, as disturbing as it was also in part to sort of change the conversation away from a war that's not going well.
He focused on Michigan in some of his comments and about a voter registration investigation in Michigan. What was your reaction to that?
I mean, this is a very well-known case, and actually one of the ways that we know the system does work. It's been public since 2021. A local official realized there was a bad organization operating in that area, notified law enforcement. They took action. No one ever fraudulently voted or registered based on that activity there. So it was actually an example of like the system working. The president has name-checked Michigan and Detroit a number of times just in the past 6 months. And tonight, I think, was just a continuation of a book that he's writing that sort of lays the story out so that when he loses in November, he can claim that he didn't. He can claim that he actually won. He's laying the story out, and tonight was just a very visible, public way of continuing that story.
Do you share the concern that we just heard from Congressman Himes that when vote counting is going on in Michigan, Donald Trump could try to seize the ballots?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I feel so seriously about this issue that we put out a bill, the No Troops at Our Polls Act, that literally says you cannot send uniformed military or federal law enforcement to touch our voting machines, our votes, or to take care of alleged security threats around our polls. The president refuses to rule out, as does his cabinet, sending in uniformed military. And you have to think through these scenarios. Think about that for a second. I've had meetings with officials in Michigan. What if they send in the military and they say, you know what, we're coming into this voting location. We're going to seize machines. What will we do? What if they don't have a warrant? I mean, these are some really scary kind of tabletop exercises, things that we're having here because the president has made clear this is not a joke to him. This is not something he just says kind of offhandedly. He's obsessed with it. And so he's willing to really do anything to win, quote unquote, in November.
And this time it wouldn't be about trying to get a mob of Trump supporters to attack a vote counting facility in Michigan. It would be sending in federal agents.
Well, look, I mean, he has already created, there's an authoritarian playbook that plays out whether you're here or in Europe or in former Soviet Union that people use. And one of the big things they do when they feel like they're going to lose, when they feel like they're in trouble, is they create security incidents. They create events where only they, the federal law enforcement, federal military, have to come in and solve that problem. So I've been asking over and over, like, do we actually see a credible threat to our polls, to our voting, our ballots, to our voting machines? And the president keeps regurgitating, like he did tonight, the same information we've had for many, many years, redacted, put out on these websites that just reinforce the same thing. There is not a threat that would require U.S. military or federal law enforcement to respond. So I think that we just need to be awake to the fact that what we heard tonight, what we saw in real time, was a paranoid president who was willing to do anything and use the bully pulpit to do anything he can to claim victory in November, whether he wins or not.
Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin, thank you very much for joining us on this important coverage tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. And coming up, Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff joins us next. As we showed you earlier, Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff told us 9 hours ahead of Donald Trump's speech what to expect from that speech. And of course, Senator Ossoff was correct. Joining us now is Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff of Georgia. He is a member of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Senator, thank you very much for joining us tonight. How did you do it? How did you figure out what Donald Trump was going to say tonight?
Lawrence, thank you for having me. And tonight I heard a failed president desperately casting about for excuses to meddle in the upcoming election if he can, or to discredit the result when he loses decisively, as I expect he will. I heard a president who, as war spirals and as prices keep climbing for families across the country, is, as always, focused on his personal grievances, focused on his personal shame and humiliation, and above all, focused on his personal fear of the accountability that will come when we win this fall. But this is important, folks, and I want you to hear me out when I say this, because I also heard a president clearly signaling his intent to attack these elections and to undermine voting rights. And you know it's going to be right here in Georgia, the critical battleground state. Look, we have an opportunity this fall to deal a rebuke so decisive that no president will attempt abuses and corruption like this for centuries. That will be a great service to our republic. But he is signaling his plans to come right here to Georgia, attack the election and undermine voting rights. And I'm asking folks to take action right now. Grab your phone, grab your laptop, go to electjon.com, answer the president tonight overwhelmingly. Do this thing, chip in, join our team, help us get out the vote and protect voting rights.
You told reporters today at the Capitol, reminded everyone, all of us, about Donald Trump's criminal phone call to the Secretary of State of Georgia asking for more votes. And you told us we should play that, which we did in this hour. It's how we began our coverage tonight, was to hear Donald Trump's voice once again committing that federal and state election crime of calling and saying to the Republican Georgia Secretary of State, I just want to find 11,780 votes. And every time you hear it, you're hearing the person who tried for the biggest cheating and interference in presidential elections in history. And there he was trying to preach against tonight. And he used this phrase, cheating and interference.
Well, that's right. He tried to steal the presidency when he lost it the first time. And that's why we can't be complacent. That's why we cannot dismiss this threat to voting rights. He's making his intentions very clear. And Lawrence, it's not enough just to be alert to it. We have to take action right now. If the effect of the president's speech is that everybody tuned into this broadcast right now goes to electjon.com and helps empower my team to do what we need to do to win in Georgia, then we're taking effective action to fight back.
Jim Himes offered the scenario in your particular election earlier in this program tonight, that the vote, he's imagining a world in which the polls are closed, it's the election night, you're winning. The pattern is showing that you're winning. Maybe even the networks are calling it for you at that point. And Donald Trump sends in federal agents to seize the ballots in Georgia. Jim Himes, one of your counterparts on the House Senate Intelligence Committee, now believes that is not just possible, but that could very well be Donald Trump's plan and intent. What could Georgia do about that?
Look, I think we can't put anything past this man. He is depraved, he is amoral, and above all, he cares exclusively about himself. And that is why we need to win here in Georgia by overwhelming margins. We can leave nothing to chance. And I want folks to know, though, that by attacking voting rights in Georgia, he is not deterring or intimidating anybody. He is galvanizing defiant determination to stand up to this president and to vote like Georgians have never voted before. But we have huge work ahead of us to mobilize the kind of massive, overwhelming turnout necessary to win decisively in this crucial battleground state.
What is the plan if the Democratic senators were meeting tomorrow in their policy lunch? What would Democratic senators be? What's the action plan that would come out of this speech tonight for Democratic senators?
We have to be focused on winning the election. We have to be focused on having the real power in the Senate and in the House to check this president, to constrain this president. We restore checks and balances not by sitting around and meeting and laying policy plans. We restore checks and balances by winning this election overwhelmingly. And that will depend on Georgia. There is no path back to the Senate majority without winning this race in Georgia, where I am the only Democratic senator running for re-election in a state the president won. I expect them to spend hundreds of millions of dollars attacking me here over the next 5 months. So what's the plan? The plan is to win. And that's going to take not just senators sitting in Washington, but folks all across the country who have $10 or $15 to spare, who can get their laptop, get their phone, go to electjohn.com right now and be part of the fight back.
Do you believe there's anything the Senate can do between now and then with the Department of Homeland Security in particular to somehow constrain what their activity might be on Election Day?
We have to use the power that we have in the minority, the power that we have over appropriations, the power that we have conducting oversight, putting these officials on the spot under oath, like you saw yesterday with Jay Clayton, the nominee for Director of National Intelligence, in front of the Intelligence Committee, who I questioned pointedly about election integrity. He revealed that he doesn't have the integrity or the independence to stand up to the president. But we can ask them tough questions under oath, whether it's him or the Attorney General or the Secretary of Homeland Security. But again, I got to be very blunt with you, Lawrence. We are in the minority in the Senate. Our tools are limited, and the answer is to win. Victory is the only solution.
Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, Andrew Weissmann joins us next. We just received this statement from Senator Sheldon Whitehouse tonight. We are witnessing a failed, unstable president now trying to misuse the powers of the federal government to taint an American election backed by his coterie of creepy billionaires. We will be ready. We have systems to protect the vote and lawyers to defend those systems. The important thing right now is for the public to see and understand what this lawless and increasingly unhinged president is trying to do. Hours after Republican Senator Thom Tillis demanded this morning that Todd Blanche meet with Epstein survivors in order to win Senator Tillis's vote for his confirmation, Todd Blanche suddenly found the time to meet with Epstein survivors, something he has been refusing to do until now, including occasionally telling the lie that he was not allowed to meet with them. And here is how that meeting with Todd Blanche went, according to survivor Liz Stein.
It had absolutely nothing to do with us, and it had everything to do with Blanche checking a box so that he can get a promotion. I don't think that we had high expectations going into this meeting. I certainly did not, but I didn't expect to walk out of the meeting feeling the way that we feel right now. It was demoralizing, to say the very least. And I think that Todd Blanche had an opportunity today to throw us some kind of bone, to agree to something, just, if he offered almost anything, I think that we would have been happy that he just offered us something, but he completely talked around questions. He didn't give transparent answers. He didn't give us any promises as far as following up on investigative leads. He had no real answers for the Ghislaine Maxwell transfer and no real explanation for the improper redactions. What he did say was that he would be open to meeting us again. However, he would be open after we go to the FBI. Survivors have been going to the FBI for 30 years. Right. For 30 years, we've been going to the FBI. And why should we have any confidence in the FBI or the DOJ right now? Again, it felt like more political posturing and using survivors the way that we've been used as political pawns. We're victims of crime. At the end of the day, we're victims of the crime of sex trafficking. And the fact that our Department of Justice will not take that seriously is beyond concerning, not just to us, but should be concerning to Americans all across this country.
Joining us now is Andrew Weissman, former FBI general counsel and an MS Now legal analyst. He is the author of the best-selling book, Liar's Kingdom: How to Stop Trump's Deceit and Save America. Andrew, I want to get your view of what Senator Sheldon Whitehouse just said about when he said, "We will be ready," and he basically talked about what the lawyers will be armed to do going into this election. But I first want to get your reaction to what we just heard about Todd Blanche's meeting, finally, for the first time ever today, with Epstein's survivors.
Listening to her is heartbreaking. One of the things that you have to do at the Department of Justice, it's part of the reason you are there, is to deal with victims. That is why you take the job, is to do justice for them. And sometimes those meetings can be very hard because you do not have good news. You cannot give them everything they want. That is part of the job. I was fortunate enough to see so many wonderful role models. Robert Mueller is one of them, but so many who dealt with that so well and took the time. They didn't have to be coerced to do it. They understood it was part of their job. It is such an indictment of the lack of character of the person who's seeking to be the attorney general. And it's just one of many things, but it is heartbreaking to hear that because it so goes against what it means to be in the Department of Justice.
You know, people have been wondering about Thom Tillis's vote, and he said today that he's trying, he actually said that line that senators will say sometimes, that he's trying to get to yes. And then he said, but of course, there would have to be this meeting with Todd Blanche before, I would vote for him. And within hours of that, the meeting takes place.
It's so pathetic. And it then is a good translation, though, to the topic that you've been talking to your guests about and to the comments from Senator Whitehouse, which is that we cannot count on people like Vice President Pence or even Bill Barr, people to stand up to this president when the midterms or the next presidential election happens. It is such a clear signal. I agree completely with your other guests that what was said tonight is so illogical that there's only one interpretation. I mean, suddenly you have a president who cares about foreign election interference. I mean, for me, you could understand why it took me aback, because I worked for Robert Mueller in the special counsel investigation, where all I heard day in and day out was how our claims of foreign election interference were a hoax. Well, now it's suddenly, as truthful as the day is long. He then, of course, has gotten rid of the people who are there to thwart foreign election interference. I could go on and on. So his claims both lack evidence, they're inconsistent. And so you do have to ask yourself, why is that being done? And to me, it is so clearly a precursor to sending in the military, sending in the Department of Justice to seize ballots. I think that is just clearly what is going to happen. I don't think it's just to say, oh, look, I lost, but I really should have won. I think it is to actually do what he tried to do last time, but people stood in his way.
So there's Trump tonight claiming China is trying to swing our elections, while he was the candidate who publicly asked Russia to help him. He said to a big Trump rally, China, if you're listening. Russia, if you're listening. Russia, if you're listening, please hurt Hillary Clinton in any way you can. And your investigation found Russia immediately did that, within hours after that speech.
Absolutely. He also was asked, whether he thought there would be anything wrong with taking information from a foreign government to help undermine your opponent. And he said, no, absolutely not, even though that is a crime to do that. I mean, so suddenly he has found that election interference is an issue. And to me, you have to ask, well, why? And why, if he's claiming that there's all of this election fraud that is actually going on, why have we not seen any cases? I looked at the White House website where he claims that there's 250,000 foreigners who have registered to vote. There's no support for it on the White House website. It is literally a claim of that. He claims that it's in 4 states only, and yet there's been no prosecutions. And so you have to ask, it's so illogical and unsupported that you have to say, well, why is it there? It's not just to say, oh, look, I actually won. We know that he's going to do that, but we know from the last time that he's actually going to take actual steps to thwart the actual vote. And so this is all a precursor. I completely agree with Senator Whitehouse that this is one where people have to really wake up. It's not just a question of voting, it's a question of being at the polls, recording what they see, really being alert, because we are really going to have a fight for our democracy.
And we're all going to have to keep thinking every day, have we thought of everything that we can do to defend this election by the time we get to Election Day? Andrew Weissmann, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
We'll be right back. That is tonight's Last Word.